Welcome back to another episode of How to Become an Obstacle Buster. I'm your host, Warren Wandling, the show that's dedicated to bringing leaders and entrepreneurs strategies, tips, and resources to overcome their obstacles, to build resilience, and achieve success. Hey, if this is your first time listening or you've been part of our community for a while, thank you for tuning in today. Before I introduce you to my guest today, I want to make sure that you're aware of a new resource to help you to be resilient. It's our private Facebook community called Leadership with Purpose. So you can either search in groups in Facebook and search Leadership with Purpose. And I'll also make sure that link is in the show notes as well. In our community, I share strategies, tips, and resources so you can step into less stress, greater profit, and experience the work you love. It's also a great place to connect with other like-minded leaders. So I look forward to seeing you in our community. Our sponsor for the show today is Audible. If you love listening to podcasts, I know you're going to love Audible like I do. It's a great way to be able to listen to books that you want to read this year. So if you're not already subscribed to Audible, let me get you a free book and a free 30-day trial. The book that I recommend is The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. By simply visiting warrenwandling.com/audible, you can grab your free book and your free 30-day trial to Audible. Again, that's warrenwandling.com/audible. WARRENWANDLING.com/AUDIBLE. I have a great guest with me today, Neil Sahota, an IBM Master inventor, United Nations AI advisor, professor at UC Irvine, and globally recognized speaker and author. Neil is the founding member of UN's Artificial Intelligence for Social Good community, and he's here today to talk about ways we can harness the power of AI and use it for social good. Neil's also the author of Own the AI Revolution, providing a future-forward look at AI, focusing on how businesses can use it to commercialize while doing good in the world. Welcome to the show, Neil.
Hey, awesome to be here, Warren. Very excited for our conversation.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to our conversation as well. As you might know, on How to Become an Obstacle Buster podcast, I share different strategies, tips, and resources helping our leaders and entrepreneurs to overcome their obstacles, build resilience, and achieve success. So to start that conversation today, as an IBM Master inventor, United Nations AI advisor, professor at UC Irvine, and globally recognized speaker, tell us about your business.
Warren, my business is really around helping organizations essentially Uber themselves before they get Kodak. So,
Oh, wow, I love that.
I believe that if you're not trying to disrupt yourself, someone is going to disrupt you. But it's tough for businesses to kind of figure that out. And, I've had some amazing opportunities in my life, and I've done a dozen once in a lifetime type of like projects, engagements that, I've developed this framework I call tugboat around disruptive thinking that I actually help organizations tap into this and tap into the capabilities of emerging technology to find these opportunities so that they can actually take the next step before someone else does it.
So that's really fascinating in reference to disrupt the marketplace, which I know we'll get into further into that conversation. But as you're embracing that concept and helping your clients to be able to disrupt, what's the greatest obstacle your clients encounter?
That's a really good question, Warren. I think it's really not knowing what to do. A lot of my clients, actually, just a lot of people I speak to in general, I'm always hearing the same thing from them. And that's like, I know I need to do something, but I don't know how to figure it out. And that's the big challenge. And I get that they're sometimes looking at this going like, I'm trying to fix something that's not really broken, at least yet. But they know that at some point something's going to get changed and they don't want to get caught flat-footed. But it's hard to see the forest from the trees, to be cliche, because it's like, we're doing is working, we're successful, but what's that next thing going to be? How do I figure that out?
So I could see how that could be a common challenge. And certainly in the last year, and that we're recording this in 2020 the, with COVID-19 that impacted us on a world stage, that people can just settle in once they've pivoted or they're trying to adjust within their business to see further several years in advance to know that they need to pivot now and be able to disrupt it. So is there a strategy that you use or teach to be able to break through that area of where they're getting stuck so they can start to realize that they need to disrupt their marketplace?
I do. I mean, I tap into my framework here, and it really starts with the worst word a child ever learns. The why. So
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you have kids, Warren, but it's like when they learn that word, your world just goes topsy turvy because they're like, well, brush your teeth, why? Eat your vegetables, why? Right? And
Right.
ironically, I feel like organizations don't ask that question often enough about themselves. Like, why are we doing it? Or why are we doing it this way? Or why would this create value for our customers? And if we don't start thinking about these things, it's really hard for a company to come in and say, okay, I'll be disruptive. I'll figure out the next thing because it's like everything is humming along. And so coming in and kind of shattering that illusion for them that right now things are good and you're beating your competitors, but you don't know who your next competitor is going to be. I mean, look what happened with Blockbuster when Netflix came to the front, right? Blockbuster
Right.
was this big behemoth, and they're like, who's this Netflix? And okay, they're sending DVDs via mail, but Netflix, you didn't have to return by a certain day. You can watch these things as many times as you want, no late fees. It got some traction, but Netflix, they were also smart, thinking like, well, people aren't just going to keep watching DVDs, right?
Uh-huh. Right.
So what would the next thing be? And I think they really tapped into that, the best way to predict the future is to create it.
Mm-hmm.
And you start seeing the proliferation of the internet, other things, and they start thinking like, well, what if you could watch movies through your computer, right? And we all kind of chuckle at that, but at the time that was a revolutionary thought. There wasn't really anyone doing that. Even YouTube was still kind of a rough idea, rough website out there. And Blockbuster's thinking, well, no one's ever really going to do that. They want to be able to enjoy it on their TV, but at some point, technology catches up, or technology changes the way we do things. And look at what happened today, right? Tons of people have Netflix subscriptions. Disney started Disney Plus. CBS has got their own streaming. NBC just launched their own. And Blockbuster, they went the way of the dodo.
Exactly. I love the statement in reference to if you the best way to protect the future is to create your own, is to create the future, and that's a great way to be able to stack that question above the why question to start to problem solve what's that next move.
100%. I'm trying to remember. I think it was GE, Amazon, and there was another company suddenly got into healthcare, or maybe it was Walmart on Amazon. I forget.
Mm-hmm.
But the clinics, the health insurance companies are like, wait a second, what are these guys doing? And they're like, none of them are in are in the healthcare industry, so they never had them on their radar. But suddenly they got freaked out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for them, they're looking at us like, look, we've already got customers coming into like Walmart stores, got GE Health, these other things. We know people like convenience. What if they came in and they could buy whatever they needed to buy, but they're also getting their healthcare services, or it's an add-on with the pharmacy stuff, or whatever it might be. But suddenly, in the past, you probably would have seen, the CEO of United Health Group or Anthem go like, "Whoa, yeah, this is just some sort of crazy farce or something like that." But as soon as that announcement was made, they were in a panic, like they figured something out. We have to understand what they figured out because they're going to disrupt my business. right? And that's the biggest. That it goes back to the obstacle, right? And that
Hmm.
I know I need to do something. I don't know what it is. That's what a lot of the smart companies are realizing now is that they're living in panic and that someone has figured out something to disrupt their business model.
So, what was a key strategy that contributed to your success building your career?
My career, I think I was very open to new opportunities. And by that, I wasn't fixated on title or necessarily money, but I was really focused on learning and trying to create value, right? I didn't want to just do things for the sake of doing them. And as a result, when I was confronted with a problem, I wouldn't look at just the problem as that one specific instance. I would try and see if I could generalize it and come up with a solution that would try and solve the problem in most cases. And everyone's like, "Oh, that's what we should all do." But my experience is most people don't actually think that way, right? We get so laser focused on our tasks, and as a result, I wound up developing a lot of IP and other things. But I started getting credit as a thought leader in like innovation and disruption. And they're like, "Wow, how did you come up with these crazy ideas? Like, how were you able to take Starbucks back to China or help Disney figure out the Marvel opportunity?" It's just like I've learned to teach. I've learned to think differently. I've learned to be able to step into different perspectives, but keep focusing on the end in mind. Like, what's the goal I'm trying to accomplish? What's the value I want to create? And I've only been able to do that because I've had such a widespread, diverse, set of opportunities in front of me. I never went I'm going to get really good and super specialized. It's ironically the generalist that has created kind of this amalgam for me to connect all these dots together.
Well, that's fascinating. First of all, I think for our listeners, if they're that leader, the entrepreneur that's trying to continue to grow their business or their team, is to be open to new opportunities, not to get stuck or tunnel vision on the specific product or task that they're working on, and looking for how they can continue adding value.
It's 100% agreed, Warren, and it's common sense. I put in air quotes, but
Uh-huh.
I've seen so many entrepreneurs, so many founders miss in that regard. I remember hearing a pitch from the startup company that they had a very great, well-designed educational toy. The tagline was like, inventing inventors, and they were so in love with their idea, but starting like you have to talk to customers or you talk to parents because none of them were parents themselves. And they're like, well, we know, we did some market research, and it's like, with who? It's like, of course, our friends. But it's like that's not really good. So when they actually started talking to potential customers, they were shell shocked by the feedback they got. Right? It wasn't that they didn't like the toy; they thought it was well designed, but they're like, educational toy is not my primary reason for buying a toy, especially one that costs like $50. And they're like, well, don't you want your kid to have a great job and get a STEM career and be successful? And of course, every parent's going to say yes, but that's not the right question that should have asked, right? The why was kind of missing there. And when they actually dug into it, I thought one mom put it really well to them when she's like, if I'm going to buy a $50 toy for my son, it should keep him occupied long enough for me to do the laundry uninterrupted. Right. And that's when they realized that they had missed the mark with their value propositions. Unfortunately, rather than pivot, they just decided to fold the company, right? Because it wasn't really aligned with what they were hoping to accomplish.
So I'm curious, what is repositioning AI for social good?
Well, we're used to the mindset that when you do something, you either do it for commercial use, like you make money,
Mm-hmm.
or you go the nonprofit, you do it for public service, for social good, right? We can actually do both. And we're in an interesting point right now where we kind of have this generational shift moving towards social enterprise, social entrepreneurship, where you see Generation Z in particular that they want to work for a place where they're helping the world. And you think of all the problems that we have, from hunger to poverty to homelessness, to climate change. I won't run out all the entire list, but my work with the United Nations, part of this is the Sustainable Development Goals. So the member nations have agreed to 17 goals, like ending hunger by 2030, but there's a huge gap in the resources. But what we found is AI, we can actually tap into AI to bridge some of that gap. And this is not just, I'm going to go and create a new form of entertainment, or what some of the things that happened first. It was like, we can tap into this to actually help farmers grow more crops with less resources, less water, less topsoil. We can actually increase people's access to healthcare or increase their access to justice. They can still start ventures. We have something called the Innovation Factory associated with the AI for Good initiative, where we have these social entrepreneurs starting businesses around this. But we don't naturally gravitate to social good for like a new technology or a new trend. And it takes champions and leaders to actually kind of help create that mindset, to try and create this shift. And so with AI, ironically, because there was so much skepticism initially, there was a very receptive audience with government agencies and nonprofits saying, like, wait, this will help me do what? So instead of being able to feed just 10,000 people with this program, I could tap into AI and feed 100,000 people with the same amount of resources. Sign me up, right? Or, you know what, I can increase my ability to provide clean drinking water and no additional cost. Sign me up. And so that's it's these trends, these needs that are really a focus, that kind of repositioning.
Yeah, I love that idea, kind of that repositioning with AI around social good, because you're right in reference to the Gen C generation. They're looking for something that they can do, something that's going to be bigger than themselves, to be able to give back. They want to add value and have meaning in life, and that value has really been raised within that specific generation.
100%.
So, as the author of as the author of Own the AI Revolution, Unlock the Artificial Intelligence Strategy, how can a business owner disrupt their industry, boost profitability, and grow their business with a powerful AI strategy?
Well, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about create the future. I think too many people feel like they're the passenger, right? When they have a chance to be the driver. And that's one of the big reasons I wrote this book, is to enable people to be the driver. There's a lot of smart tech people out there, but they're probably not going to be able to tell you what you need or what the opportunities are. How many technologists understand the day-to-day problems of an accountant or a marketer or a doctor or a lawyer, HR person? It really starts with, again, that disruption and the idea. And so my book actually outlines the steps on how to do this. So how you can actually, as a non-technical business leader, tap into this and figure out the answer to the question, this is what I should be doing, right? What should I be doing? This is how I can figure out what I should be doing. And it shares the stories of non-technical people that have really followed my process. And honestly, I can tell you the most successful AI startups I have seen were started by non-technologists. Like, you look at law, the most successful AI startup I've seen is Legalmation. They
Mm-hmm.
were started by 3 lawyers, right? They knew nothing about like AI or technology or couldn't code, but they understood the pain points lawyers face, and they understand where the opportunities are, right? They found, like, I call it the urinal cake opportunity, that kind of really grunt work that requires some level of thinking, right? It's tedious, it takes time, but has to be done. That's exactly what they wound up doing. They looked at it and said, if someone files a complaint against my client, we have to respond back. We have to file these court documents, we have to do interrogatories, deposition questions, start formulating case strategy. They just looked at all that. They figured out the opportunity. They got some smart technologists to help them build it. And now they have an AI associate lawyer. Just their AI system does the work 12, what would take an associate lawyer 12 hours to do, does it in 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's a great. I love that insight in reference to it's not the technologist, but it's the someone that's already going through that pain, so they know what to be able to address to see what AI could assist in that process.
Well, it's huge, right? I mean, this is where I think people kind of they lose the sight, thinking that I don't understand AI, I don't understand the technology. It's a tool,
Mm-hmm.
right? You may not know how to make a hammer, but you can learn how to use it. And that's, I think, the key thing for these business people. And it's more than just automation, right? Because we're used to machines, computers, being about doing something faster or cheaper or less errors. There's value in automating with AI, but you're only unlocking maybe 20, 30% of that value, right? The reason like Legal Nation did so well was that they actually used the technology to innovate, right? They found a new, better way of doing this. They have Walmart. If you'll indulge me for a second, they have Walmart as a
Uh-huh.
client, and I love this. I love this because it's the story. Because the Walmart got sued. There was a guy who bought a chicken. Ironically, he was a dentist, but when he bit into the gizzard, he chipped his tooth on a stone, and he sued Walmart for damages. And I don't know what the exact amount would be, but normally Walmart would just settle out a case for maybe $60,000, $80,000, whatever it is, just to be done with it, right?
Uh-huh.
But now that they're using Legal Nation's AI lawyer, the AI, did all this work in 2 minutes, and part of what it came back with on the case strategy was it's actually a material fact that when chickens eat, they eat stones and they get stored in the gizzard. So by buying a whole chicken and by trying to eat the gizzard, the plaintiff should have been aware of that risk. Thus, Walmart's not really liable. That argument won Walmart the case, right? And I talked to the managing partners of several large law firms asking, like, would your lawyers have figured that out? And they all told me, not unless my lawyer was a chicken farmer. So,
Right.
you know, that's the power we can actually tap into. It's not just about some automation. It created a unique value here, and that it's processing so many millions of data points. You think about all the libraries all out there, not just about law, but on chickens and all this stuff, brought to bear to help your customer, help your client.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, right? Because it changes that profession from a legal perspective, but raises the value of the lawyer in reference to the higher skill level instead of someone else that's looking for all those documentation through the previous cases. And that's the same thing within like the HR department. I know in reference to some of the listeners on our show, either if they're an entrepreneur or leader, they're involved with the hiring process. So I guess it's that same vein of how can we use AI that really interrupts or disrupts the recruiting process?
I think you're going to love this, Warren, because there's a lot of interesting work going on with recruiting and HR in general and AI. So you look at recruiting, if we just boil it down very simply, when you want to hire somebody, you're looking, are they qualified and are they a fit? Right? Are they going to fit in with my team, fit in with the corporate culture? Qualification part, we tend to be pretty good at. We do the interviews, we can have them take a skills assessment or some sort of test, right? But on the fit side, it's kind of hard, right? Most of us aren't our true selves during a job interview. It's almost like using those dating apps like Tinder or something like that, where you see the person, they're laying with the tiger or they're going, derp guy fighting or something like that. I had my own experience interviewing people where it's like, some weeks is going to be long. You might have to put 60, 70 hours a week. And like, oh, I love overtime. I love working extra. I like to work 100 hours a week. And you're thinking, okay. But it's hard to make that fit. And so you've had some very smart companies come back and kind of, I shouldn't say kind of, they have disrupted the system. They're tapping into what's called psychographic profiling and neurolinguistics, the capabilities within AI about psychology and language, where the AI can actually help you assess the cultural fit of the person in comparison against your team, against the corporate culture, and tell you how well they're going to actually adapt to this environment? Are they going to survive or are they going to thrive? And by doing this, it's actually resequenced the recruiting process. So, normally what you're posting, people submit their resumes, you do your keyword search, you get your narrow stack, the 50 we'll call it, and the hiring manager looks at them and says, I want to interview these 10 people, right? Now what's happening is when people submit their information, the company's using this AI technology. They're having the AI assess the people to see which ones are cultural fits, right? You might have 1,000 applicants, and they might come back and said, well, these are the top 20 in terms of fit, right? Now the hiring manager is looking at those 20 resumes and saying, like, okay, who seems to have the right qualifications? It might be 5 people. So now it's like, I want to interview these 5 people. So it's kind of reslotted that. But it's also gone even a step further now. O'Melveny, which is one of the biggest law firms in the world, they don't do traditional recruiting at all anymore. You want to go work for the firm, they have you register for a game. And the game is run by an AI system. And so the game is not the same for everybody. And what the AI is actually doing is it's trying to assess not just your skills, but your work style, your attitude, your personality to see how it will mesh within the O'Melveny culture. And so you play the game, and depending on how you score, you're either invited to an interview or you're just declined. Now, I know a lot of people in the audience are probably thinking, okay, that sounds kind of cool, but it's also kind of scary, right, Warren? I mean,
Right.
how do you how do you know? How do you know who's going to be good and who's a fit? Well, we can actually analyze the culture of a company, but who's good? That's the big question everyone has. And there's real concern that, well, historically, O'Melveny and the other big law firms, their recruiting style was to go to the top 20 law schools, look at the top 10% of the students. So is there a lack of diversity in that? Are these people that may be upper middle class or wealthy? Are they maybe all more men, more white, right? And they're worried that those implicit biases will come through and screen out possibly really good qualified candidates. The irony here is O'Melveny went down this track to improve their diversity and inclusion, right? Because of the way they recruited, they had a very limited pool. Now that they've kind of opened it up, they've actually said they're actually seeing candidates and interviewed candidates they normally never would have met before. So is this going to be successful or not? We don't quite know yet. We probably need 3 years worth of data to see how well it works, but they're a year and a half into it.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And from a reference to a candidate perspective, I know then if you take it from the hiring side, just the question that comes up a lot is there a better candidate out there? Do we find the right pool of candidates that you're working from? So within the AI, is it measuring the data of the existing staff also, and that data is entered in to the system, and then new candidates that they're reviewing through AI, that also builds and strengthens the AI process?
It is. They're doing that one to figure out like what's the work style, the personality of the different teams. They're trying to look at the track record of their own employees to see who was successful, why they were successful. They're even looking at stuff. There's some companies even use this now to help align career tracks better. Because I've actually heard this myself from several clients where they've let go of people they thought were like mediocre, only
Mm-hmm.
see them turn into superstars at other companies. And it's often that they just didn't get the right opportunities or you weren't really tapping into their strengths. And so it's that kind of dichotomy, for lack of a better word, that people are realizing that I have this employee and I don't really know how good they are, right? From what
Mm-hmm.
I see in my lens, it's maybe not a great fit, maybe they're just okay, but maybe there's actually a whole potential we can actually tap into. And the companies that are actually doing this and using the AI for these better fits and better career alignment, they are all saying that employee morale has actually spiked. It's actually jumped way up. People feel more fulfilled. As a result, productivity has radically increased. And you're hearing a lot more people saying like on the job, I don't really feel like I'm working so much as I love what I do.
Yeah, that's a whole different discussion. I'd love to get into maybe at another show, but from an employee engagement perspective, how that it sounds like that's where they're using AI to be able to increase the level of employee engagement, which is such a continue to be a hot topic in today's marketplace.
It's huge, especially in a virtual work environment, right? The way we manage a person in person doesn't translate the same way virtually.
Right, exactly. So I believe that success leaves clues, and maybe AI would be able to help give us a better response on this next question. But I believe that successful people give us clues to the authors that they read and really have impacted their business and growth in their career. So, what's some of the authors that influenced you in your business?
Interesting question. Interesting question. I'd say there's probably three authors that really come to mind as influencers for me. One is Malcolm Gladwell. I love his take where he really kind of digs into it and looks at things from a different perspective. And I really think that's really important. You want to Uber yourself before you get Kodak. Second is Tom DeMarco. So he wrote the book Slack, which had a profound effect on me. If you're not familiar with it, he basically talks about that we've micro-segmented our time so much. We're so much into multitasking that we've lost our ability to innovate, right? We're trying to get every second locked in that there's no downtime anymore. And downtime is actually when people think about their work and how they do their job and look for opportunities to try and improve it, right? Try and do it more efficiently or find a new way of actually doing it. And we've actually created a system that now prevents us from doing that. So I thought that was actually fascinating since I'm very much about disruption. And then last, maybe it might be a little bit surprised because it's very different than the other two, is actually Frank Herbert. Because, he wrote the book Dune and that whole series. And, I read it when I was young and it had a profound effect on me because it showed kind of the interplay of different things, right? It's not just the story and about who has control and making money and the war between houses, but it really showed how the intermix of politics, culture, and society, and the environment play a profound effect in our lives and how they can influence for good or for bad some of the things that we try and do. And we always talk about people, process, technology. Process is pretty mature. We really developed a lot of great capabilities with technology, and we understand a lot more how to tap into that. But people are still the challenge. And you can have the greatest idea in the world, you can create the best product, but unless you get the buy-in, unless you know how to bring the right people on board, unless you know how to play the politics and be persuasive, you're not going to go very far.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those authors with our listeners. I know there'll definitely some great books on that list, and I think there's some great clues in reference to continue to expand your horizon and your list. And I always say to my listeners, if they're not an avid reader, there's always Audible to be able to get your reading in for the year.
It's a nifty way. Just you can always listen if you don't have time to read.
Exactly. So that excuse is thrown out the window. Um, so what does the future hold for you? Any special projects that you're working on?
Yeah, there's two big ones I'm doing right now. One is called Artistic Intelligence, and it's a podcast I'm hosting for the United Nations, and it centers around the intersection of art, sustainability, and technology. So one, people are blown away that artists are using AI to create new types of art.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at art, sustainability, and technology as kind of the trinity. Sustainability is the goal, right? Social good. Technology is a tool to help accomplish that goal. But you have to bring the people on board, right? How do you motivate or inspire people? How do you get them to change their behaviors? And art's a fantastic way to actually engage people on that front. So this podcast focuses on that. And then my other big project is Tuckbow. So I've actually decided that my disruptive thinking framework, I'm actually turning it into a book. So it'll be my next book. I'm about 70% done with it. So hopefully it'll be out by spring or summer next year. But I really want to try and not just educate, but enable and empower people to be able to Uber themselves before they get Kodak.
So if our listeners wanted to connect with you, what's the best way for them to be able to reach out and connect?
You can always come to my website, which is neilsahota.com. I'm always sharing my latest content with some things that I'm up to. You can also reach out through me through the contact page. I'm very active on social media, particularly LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and I'm always posting content every day, just sharing what the latest is going on, as well as trying to help give people tools for their own businesses so that they can be successful.
Well, excellent. I'll make sure all those links are in the show notes.
Appreciate it, Warren.
Well, thank you, Neil, for sharing your strategies and tips with our listeners today, helping them to break through their obstacles so they can achieve success.
Hey, my pleasure. This was a blast. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I enjoyed our conversation. Well, until next time, this is your host, Warren Wandling, saying, be resilient,